Tonight we are learning more about the earthquake that Abner and many people say they felt early this morning. Some were not so lucky, but we now know there were dozens of earthquakes and aftershocks this week alone.
KCBD News Channel 11's Parker Schaffner sat down with a seismologist who tells us why these earthquakes are becoming more common.
I've issued a declaration of disaster to be prepared in case major damage is reported.
A disaster declared after the fifth strongest earthquake on record in Texas shook parts of our region, including Lubbock. The 5.1 magnitude quake occurred east of Snyder near Hermleigh just before 9:30 this morning. In addition to this one, there have been dozens this past week.
I think this is unusual for our part of the world. You hear about them in California and other parts of the world, but West Texas, you don't think about that large of an earthquake.
While it only lasted a few seconds, some in Snyder said it was a scary situation that felt like an eternity.
I was in my office and the building started to shake, and I definitely felt this one a little bit more than I did the one the other day.
I just felt the trembling, and I tried to get underneath the door frame. Ask the Lord to help me, because you don't know how bad it's going to get.
So far, no injuries have been reported. However, there are reports of damage from this week's quakes, including cracks in walls, bricks separating from buildings, and water leaks.
We're still receiving information from throughout Scurry County from today's earthquakes. It's still too early to tell at this time the extent of the damage throughout Scurry County.
Dr. Harold Garola, an associate professor at Texas Tech who studies geophysics, says West Texas is no stranger to earthquakes. In fact, they've occurred decades before oil production even came to the area.
They weren't as frequent. They were less frequent, but there were earthquakes. And those really old faults have pressure built up on that can get triggered later.
The USGS says wastewater disposal wells are the primary cause of the recent increase in earthquakes, not fracking. However, Dr. Garola says it's way too early to point fingers.
Tectonic forces load up the faults. But then it comes down to what's the straw that breaks the camel back. Because if that fault's on the verge of breaking, then something can break it. It's one of these things where you can say overall, over a period of years, yes, there's more earthquakes than that because of oil activity. But you can't say this one was caused by oil activity.
Parker Schaffner, KCBD News Channel 11.
People who experienced damage from today's earthquakes are asked to report it to the Texas Department of Emergency Management. We have a link to the form on our website.
So putting curiosity aside for many of us, since it can create damage and it can create a lot of fear in some people because of the increase in seismic activity in the region, the Texas Railroad Commission is now looking into how it can mitigate the risk of earthquakes.
KCBD News Channel 11's Madeline Hall joins us to explain what could be the cause behind the shakes and how the Railroad Commission will address it. Madeline?
Karen and Abner, this map right here, these little specks, show various wells in Scurry and Fisher counties. These wells are where oil companies dispose of the contaminated water that comes out of the ground during oil and gas production. Now, it is important to note again that fracking is not directly causing most earthquakes, but rather the disposal of that wastewater. We reached out to the Texas Railroad Commission after today's earthquake, which reported sending investigators to the Fisher-Scurry County line to inspect the saltwater disposal wells within the cluster of earthquakes this week. The Railroad Commission will then evaluate the next steps to mitigate the seismic activity. Now, it's not yet clear what those next steps will be. However, in December of last year, the Railroad Commission found wells in Culberson and Reeves counties, which are west of Odessa, to have contributed to seismic activity. The squares on this map represent wells in the areas, and the circles represent earthquakes. In response to the increased activity, the Commission suspended disposal well permits within those boundaries. Now, as it investigates, the Commission does say that it will continue to take necessary measures to protect the environment and the residents in the area around Scurry County. Karen and Abner.
Thank you,